thank you all for being here. Thanks, Sam and Ron, for giving your welcome speeches. I did want to say one thing. I am Carlotta Collette, and I'm acting Metro President, and that's why I got to be up here to welcome you. But I'm also very, very proud to be District 2 Metro Councilor. And one of the main reasons I'm proud of that is because we build streetcars in District 2. If you want streetcars that are built in the United States, you have to come to us. My constituents, United Streetcars, build the first American-made streetcars in over half a century. So I'm very excited about being their counselor. And now I have the honor to introduce someone who is a good friend to Portland, Dr. Gordon Price. And you know, people get up at these conferences and they start to introduce people, and they give this long diatribe about, you know, where they went to school, yada, yada, yada. And I don't know about you, but I usually start texting and check my emails and wait till the actual speaker comes up. But Gordon Price is somebody that actually deserves that kind of introduction. And it's because he's lived everything that he talks about. Gordon Price was on the Vancouver City Council for 6 terms. And I can tell you, as a former city councilor, that's a painful place to be. I mean, you can be, Metro councilor is kind of painful. Elected officials right now is painful indeed. But being a city councilor, when things start going wrong in your city, I mean, if they don't pick up your garbage, people call a city councilor. They call them mayor. So you know, I mean, Gordon has experienced real community. Not only was he on the city council for 6 terms, he was also on the first board of TransLink, the transit group. And those of you who might be some of the TriMet board members here know what that feels like. He also served on the Vancouver Regional Council. And so I have a good feeling of what that feels like. He is the director of the city's program at Simon Fraser University. He is an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia, and he speaks and lectures here at Portland State. He is a great friend to Portland, and he's going to talk about why cities like Portland are important to the world. Well, people like Gordon Price are really important to cities like Portland. Welcome, Gordon.
Thanks, Carlotta. That was very generous. Thank you. Good morning, Rail Volution family. That was a very nice introduction. In fact, very special. I'm now a doctor. Thank you for that. Simon Fraser, I like to say I can be political without being accountable and academic without being qualified. It's a perfect position, but it's not a doctor. And thank you for the invitation. Here I am between Adams and Blumenauer, running the gamut from A to B. Which actually is a pretty wide gamut. You can fit a Canadian in there. Strange, perhaps, but not a stranger. So they've asked me, to, kind of give you the real rundown on Portland. I have drunk too much of the pure crystalline water of Bull Run to be able to say that I'm objective about this place. I'm married to a Portlander. I came back and forth for about 10 years, every 2 or 3 weeks. Saw more of I-5 than I ever wanted. And maybe enough of Portland to try and give you some perspective on it from someone who doesn't live here, but still feels like, in a way, I kind of have a little bit of DNA from Oregon in my blood now. DNA in my blood? Well, you get the metaphor. And I've been asked to address this, why the world needs Portland. That is a challenge, but I think we can start with this. Beer. It's true, yeah, more great beer per capita, and this comes from personal research. You got to get out and try it. It's the grease of conviviality and civility in this town. That, the coffee, all these cliches that are so true about this place. The first experience I had on the old Bridgeport, for those of you who remember it, when the Pearl District was just old warehouses. You really had a tangible sense of that special quality, which I've never been able to accurately describe. I'm going to do my best now. But it starts around a glass of good brew. It's also the place where I first realized there was provenance to food. You would pick up a menu, they would tell you where everything came from. You know where that chicken lived. And it's still true more than ever. This was the place that we now think of as starting the 100-mile diet. You can reliably feed yourself on everything that is grown nearby here. That's a special quality to Oregon. They're very proud of it for good reason. The culture here, of course, bikes. It's where I first met Rex on a bike, you know. They were the outsiders then who became the people who ran this place. There is even almost like a small publishing industry around it. Is Mia Burke here, or Jeff Mapes? 2 great books, Pedaling Revolution, Joyride. When people start to write books about the biking experience in their city, you know, this is very profound. And it's just one aspect of the particular nature of the culture here. Talk a little bit more about that later. And finally, just to kind of round out the perspective, more strip bars per capita than anywhere. This is part of the reliable mythology of this place. I've never seen the research. But okay, so it's beer, bikes, and boobs, I suppose, which would suggest that the iconic Portlander is a drunken, naked zoo bomber. And if you don't know what a zoo bomber is, how many of you don't know what a zoo bomber is? Put up your hands. Portlanders, tell those people what a zoo bomber is. I'll leave it to them. Okay, so why does the world need a Portlander? That's awfully presumptuous, and being Canadian, I don't think I can touch that. Portlanders I think, are prepared to make the case. I can certainly tell you why Vancouver, BC, needs Portland. Let me illustrate. Oh yeah, keep Portland weird. Let me pass that. 2 words, food carts. They've had them. We're getting them. Here's our first food cart, and I can tell you, we will do better. But it was definitely because councillors could come down here, eat something from a food cart and not die, so that they could go back to our health department and say, why do we have to just have hot dogs on our streets? And you go to Vancouver, you will be able to see directly the impact of Portland. Tanner Springs, sustainability. Now, you know, I think this is true everywhere, in fact, just not to Portland, but sometimes, you know, we go for the green fringe on top. Well, that counts. We've done it, where we go here, we've done it in our convention center. How deep is that sustainability? Grass deep. But it's a reflection of the change in priority and psychology. The very fact we're all here in this room, 1,000 people. That, well, it may not have started in Portland. It crossed some kind of border, becoming just something fringe, tangential, into the mainstream, so that councillors, politicians, business people will get up here and argue, this is good business. That's more than grass deep. Now, the Pearl has a fascinating impact on Vancouver, I have to say, because we're the city that's often looked to have this iconic style, point and podium, the tower, right? We got tired of that. And one of the reasons why we changed is because people could come down here and walk around and see and feel this different scale. And so when it came time for us to, I put these out of order, my apologies. When it came time for us to look at how we were going to do our Olympic Village, people said, enough of the tower. If Portland can do something of this scale, let's try that out. And we did. Now, we're still making a judgment about it, I think. But it's having some place you can go to and experience. That's why Vancouver needs a Portland. That's why America needs a Portland. The world, that's a little presumptuous, but this is America. And it has its influence no matter where in the world you go. So for a place that will influence the culture of this country, and mine as well, spilling over the border. That's important. Well, streetcars, of course, always the streetcar. Well, we had our streetcar. We had it for the Olympics for 2 months, then we sent it back to Brussels. We're trying. But again, it's this ability to go down and ride it, feel it. You know, in politics, we're always dealing with reports, analysis, delegations, people talking to us. So in about 2 days, most of the City Council of Surrey, this would be the equivalent kind of Washington County and Gresham in my community, they're coming down here. They're going to ride those rails. They have a place they can come to in order to see what might work for them, but they get to make a judgment from their own experience. Yeah, the aerial tram, you got it. We're talking about it. And again, it's just a classic example, looking at maybe taking buses off the ride up to Burnaby Mountain to Simon Fraser University, my home campus. I don't even think that discussion would have come up unless there was an example that we could have pointed to. We'll see whether we can pull it off. Wasn't without controversy here, wasn't without some mistakes. A little bit of over-budgeting maybe, or at least ambitious budgeting, but once you've done it, once people experience it, once they integrate it into the life of the city, into their mental maps, that's where change comes from. There's the Olympic Village under construction, and there's the Pearl District with a streetcar running through it, and there's the original model for what was then known as Southeast False Creek. And I have no doubt that streetcar line running through it was inspired by the planners, the people, the politicians being able to come here. There's always been this kind of mutual relationship between Vancouver and Portland. In fact, we have a little friendly competition. Don't we, Mr. Mayor? You've challenged ours, he's challenged you, greenest city in the world. I don't think the Northern Europeans are overly worried about that. However, between the two of us, okay, let's raise the ante. That's our model, and Portland's gone up there enough to think they want to try it out themselves. Well, successful. I'll let you go down, take the streetcar down to South Waterfront and see what you think. Would Portland have tried it out if we hadn't done it? Well, maybe. But I know, having been part of the experience, this exchange back and forth up I-5, enough, well, wouldn't it be nice if it were rail eventually? This is why cities of about the same size, these cities of 2 million, which I think is just a great size for a region, have to do more than just dialogue. They have to experience each other's place and culture and try things out. That's why I love Portland. It's prepared to try things out. And then it influences us. When after I was here for a year or two, I began to see the common things between our two cities, the history, the DNA, if you wish. My town is fundamentally a streetcar and trolley city. We came into existence when the railway arrived in Burrard Inlet in 1887. Coincidentally, the year in Richmond, Virginia, that a guy named Frank Sprague commercialized the streetcar. It was a revolutionary moment in the history of cities. They would never be the same, particularly in Western North America, after the streetcar. It was really the city shaper. And because, not so much like Portland, we didn't build freeways into our core, that fabric is still all extant. If that map from the 1900s to the 1920s is almost useful today to give you a sense of how my city's constructed. And when you come to Portland, and here's the secret, this is an old streetcar map. Streetcars, by and large, are gone, replaced by bus routes. But the city that they created, that's still there. In my town, you can go to streetcar villages like this. This is where the real domestic culture of the city is, where immigrant groups would come in and cluster and then move on to be replaced by another. You go to these, what we'd call streetcar villages, and you really do get a tangible sense of how the fabric of the city is made up. And when you go to the Baghdad tonight, There it is, a classic streetcar village on Hawthorne. Or you can find the same on Belmont or Broadway, 23rd, 21st. I think it's the best we've ever done in terms of building cities, to be honest. A lot of what new urbanism, neo-traditionalism, smart growth is about is just recreating the streetcar city. In a post-streetcar age, we're trying to bring back that mechanism because it works so well. We always kind of know this wherever this is intact. Let me tell you, when I came to Portland for the first time and would go into the homes of people who lived in these incredible neighborhoods, the incredible bungalows they built out of the materials of the time, the wood, I noticed right away they hadn't painted over the woodwork. These were homes that would go back to the World War I era, 1920s. And you had a sense in their gardens and the planting strips out front and into their living rooms and dining rooms. This was tradition that they didn't see as nostalgic. This was what they were still living in. To me, when I walk down the streets of neighborhoods to visit friends and what we call boulevards, these planting strips, they're like English gardens. They've been adopted. People go right out into the street and make it their own. That's why they love these neighborhoods. And this stuff's by and large all intact. To me, it's the east bank of the Willamette that I feel is well, not the true Portland. As you know, when you live here after a while, each of the districts tells you a lot about the people, southwest, southeast, northeast, northwest, north. But these old streetcar neighborhoods on the east bank, that's delicious stuff. Well, of course, it could have all been bulldozed. Like in my town, when we said no to the freeways, the decision in this city not to build Mount Hood was critical. Now, Robert Moses had been here before, and he had told them where to put their freeways, and you can see on the east bank of the Willamette and the Fremont and the Markham bridges, most of it's there. But that decision is important, not just because they didn't bulldoze it through those east bank neighborhoods, but because, and this is so much about the culture of this place, they were clever enough to have read the legislation to know that they could take the money from the Mount Hood to build the first Max line. There is something about the quality of the leadership here that I've noticed, and I'm going to be a little presumptuous. I'm just kind of guessing a lot of this from what I've seen. They're smart and cunning. I'll give you another example. When they created Metro, this is one of the only elected regional boards in North America that I'm aware of. The legislation to authorize it had a title. They were going to abolish the previous regional government. That's what people thought they were voting for. And then they ended up with Metro. Very clever. Well, the same with the Max line. Really, by getting that money from the Mount Hood and putting it into the first significant light rail line, well, truly the rest is history. And they will always tell you about eliminating the freeway on the well, it wasn't a freeway. It was a busy road, expressway at the most. And ripping that up, oh yes, that was key, but of course, you know, they had another one just over here, a real freeway. So that was all intact. They had the luxury of then turning their waterfront into that remarkable park. But it's the creation of these actual living spaces where they have the Rose Festival, concerts, the loop that they've created at great expense all around the Willamette. It's this constant claiming of the natural environment in which they can be active. It's this physical engagement with this place. One of the things Rex had asked me what I may want to be known for if I was being introduced to a Portlander. He says, I've run every single foot of the Wildwood Trail. And for those of you who know that, that's about 26 miles. Haven't done it all in one time. But to explore this incredible greensward that frames the city, this bowl that people look down into, that's where the love comes from. Or Mount Hood, the forests, the gorge. Magical stuff. And there's another little piece of it that pulls nature into the heart of the city. We've done the same thing, but it's far more urban. Portland has a sense of really wanting to keep its domesticity. We're fully engaged in creating a kind of world-scale urbanism in Vancouver. But the city, you can see, again, I think some of this ability to go back and forth and mutually understand each other, they have decided that they are going to frame their downtown with truly urban places, even naming the West End, like us, after an urban form that will bring people in with enough density to maintain the commercial and I think cultural vitality of their downtown core. That's a challenge every city has these days. The architecture which they're doing it with, I'm going to say, I think on the whole is as good, if not better, than what we do. And that's a real compliment because I think, well, I like to say we reach a very high level of mediocrity sometimes. Our urban design's pretty good. Our architecture, well, I think we could learn a little bit from Portland. And yes, I'm looking at you, Petty. I think we can learn some things. And this fabric that you can see in the Pearl, which is now beginning to, I think, move throughout the city, this quality of the spaces. But on the other hand, with the Pearl, one big mistake, they didn't really design it for children. I think they're a little shocked. That fountain in the summertime is just packed with kids who come from all over this region now to share in an urban experience in an environment like that. But the neighborhood itself wasn't designed for children. There isn't a school there. Is there any plans for it now? No? There is now. But they should have thought that, I think, right from the beginning. That's the true indicator species of urban success. Children. If you can raise a kid, it works out pretty much for everybody else, too. Now, rail. Okay. Max. You're going to talk a lot about it. People will tell you a lot about it. I think the jury is still out. I will say, when I go up interstate, don't see a lot of people. Looks to me like a lightly used bus line at this point. Gets not yet to the Columbia, doesn't get to Vancouver, lots of politics there. But to me, it isn't yet working to address what I think is the number one issue that every city, Portland, Vancouver, all of us face. How are we going to transform the parts of our region that were built around the car? Huge civilizational risk here, I would argue, because we're vulnerable on this front. A little change in the price of oil, change in the circumstances. Maybe we're going to have to adapt faster than we ever wanted to or ever could. So it's the extension of rail out into those automobile suburbs that is really going to be the test. We've done a pretty good job in the maintenance and the constant, I think, improvement of the old streetcar neighborhoods, the inner ring, the truly wonderful fabric of the city that we all celebrate, my city, yours, but that's not the real test. It's what's going to happen out there, in the Milwaukees, Oregon, the Hillsboroughs, the Greshams. How those transformations occur is really going to be success. Now, we do it on a pretty heavy-duty urban scale when we get out there along our SkyTrain line. That one line, the Expo line, moves over 125,000 people a day with 90-second headways. That's serious stuff. And what's getting built around the station area is also serious in terms of density. People can have their own judgments about it, but it's a real commitment to the urbanization of the suburbs. Can Max do that? Can a streetcar line, frankly, that I can practically outwalk, going to do that? That's a really legitimate debate. We have people, Patrick Condon, for one, in our city, who would argue this is a far better way to actually build a city that works, that people care about passionately, than just moving large numbers of people long distances. That, after all, is why we have cars. Okay, maybe we're tightening it up along a corridor. But if you can't extend that out into the living fabric of the community, have you really achieved all that much? So this is how my city is transforming itself out into the suburbs, and yet, it seems to me it's still pretty much as car dependent as it ever is. And that's what it really looks like. That's the stuff we don't talk about. You're not going to hear a lot in this conference about 82nd Avenue, but you've got to go out there to see what a lot of people actually live in. The automobile suburbs, the strips, we all know them. We've all built the same stuff. We've had to. Our bylaws, our parking codes all require it. Will rail transform it, and how fast? Beaverton, I have to say, the ambition is there. I go to Lake Oswego and Beaverton, and yes, their visions, their plans, the charrette held just yesterday, is calling for a very sophisticated urbanism. Their ambition is there, but, how fast? And really, are we going to be able, how quickly to move from this? The formulas are there. This stuff makes money. We know it's success. We continue to slather it across the landscape. And if there's a dirty little secret about this region, it's that outside the urban growth boundary, because it's in a whole different state, and this is what I fly over when I come down here, and I look down and I think, my gosh, this is relieving the pressure from Portland. This is where people go so they don't pay income tax and come here where they don't have to pay sales tax. They've got that down pretty well, but to do that, there's a little bridge in the way and a big debate over how many billions of dollars to spend. How are they going to resolve that one? And can they? Is it possible to actually plan your own region when a good part of it doesn't play the same game? Will they be able to get max? Will there be a loop out there across the river? How possible will it to take the kind of political consensus that is crafted here, not without its tension? But if I have to think about the culture of this place, that's what I want to end with, because you're going to meet one of the players here just after me. There has been this ability, and I'm sure others could tell me better how it exactly happened, but when I look at how this place was created, I do see these remarkable people that go back deep in its history, often in form of mythology. Oswald West, for instance, a governor back in 1911, looked to the great natural legacy of the beaches and realized his legislature probably wasn't going to be prepared to save them if he asked simply to do it for the greater good. So he said, hey, I need this for a highway reservation. That's what those beaches are. It's a highway right-of-way. So preserve them intact for every generation. Now that's cleverness. The creation, as I've mentioned, of Metro, of how the money from Mount Hood was taken and used for max. And you can trace people, they still are active players here, of how they create that consensus. And I see that it crosses from Republican to Democrat, from right wing to left wing, from business person to community activist. Somehow they're able, because of the culture of this place, no matter what they may disagree on some points of argument, they're able to craft at least a vision to move the city. Well, at least that was true, certainly when I started coming down here in the 80s, then the initiative system and all the rest of the politics of polarization that has impacted America and spilled over the border to some degree in Canada. And I don't know about the world, but if America needs a Portland, it's because this center, I think, still holds here. This gentle, stable center. And I use that, I think, politically, and I mean it in terms of the geography of the place as well. Jarrett Walker, who will be speaking at noon today, certainly recommend you go hear him, Portland boy, truly with a world perspective, pointed out to me very simply that while Vancouver may be a city dominated by mountains and cities look at themselves as, the city on the hill, Portland is in a bowl. Beautifully scaled hills, a gentle landscape, looking into itself, sharing the place, with a homogeneous culture. It's true, I have to mention that. But they have been able to craft a consensus of place, of who they are. They're proud of it. You can hear that. This place where they try things out because they can, make mistakes, they learn from them. And now they see the flowering of that. You can feel it. The moment I get here, I just feel it. That's why I'm so happy to be, in a way, partly a Portlander. So thank you. Thank you, Portland. Making my life better. Making my city better, Vancouver, and inviting me back to share that with you. Thanks.